Okay, welcome back, guys. I've got a lot of people requesting last minute ACT test prep help. So let's pretend we've got only 24 hours to get ready for the test, or you could have maybe 7 days before the next ACT test. So if you find yourself tight on time, that probably means that you're not completely ready to take the test, and it's completely okay. But at least you'll know what to do tomorrow if you had to take the test, if you had to take it next week. You'll have a strategy, a sense of how you need to navigate throughout the test. But take the pressure off your shoulders. You're not going to try and get a perfect score because you're not going to get that perfect score without preparing for the exams. So let's just prepare to have a strategy to use during the exam so that when we walk into that test, we can feel much more comfortable taking a test. Because really, you're going to take a lot of information out of that test and know how to prepare for the next time you take the ACT. Usually the ACTs, they take place like every couple of months. You could take a look at your calendar if your school's provided it for you. If not, just contact me. All right, I'm going to switch pages. Let's go into this document, which I'll share with you. If you'd like to receive this document, just contact me. My name is Mr. Alberto. This is my number, 786-877-7231. So as you watch this, I just need you to get the big idea. The big idea of the test, you're dealing with the scoring. The scoring could go for you or against you. Whenever you're dealing with these tests, you believe that every question you work on is going to get scored. But in the ACT practice test, there's a practice test one, which links will be provided for you guys to use. You can take a digital SAT exam or you could take a paper based test. If you sign up for the ACT, the next time, I certainly would suggest that you take the ACT paper based test, no science and no essay. Again, ACT paper based test, no science, no essay. Well, you're probably asking, well, why not the digital test? Well, the digital test, it's kind of clunky using a digital exam. I like the ability to turn pages and you can see all the questions in front of you. You can flip back and forth on pages. It's a lot better for this type of test than to take it as a digital exam. However, taking a digital exam, it does have a couple of advantages because you can actually scroll through a bunch of the questions, which I'll show you in a separate video. But right now, I'd certainly say paper-based tests all the way. Now, SAT tests. SAT, they don't have a paper-based exam if you don't, I guess, suffer from online screen issues. If you do, then they'll allow you to take a paper-based test, but you have to go through a lot of doctors' testing and then have to submit reports in order for you to qualify for paper-based SAT testing. Anyhow, with the SAT, taking it online as a digital exam, it's easy. It's one of the easiest SATs ever offered. So you should do well preparing for the SAT. By the way, everything that we talk about as far as content for the ACT, you can apply to the SAT. Grammar rules never change. It doesn't matter who's testing, grammar is grammar. The test makers cannot change rules of grammar. In fact, math rules, algebra rules, geometry rules, they can never change between tests. So basically, you're taking the same type of exam. Now, the reading section of the SAT and ACT, they differ a bit. I like the SAT's format because they give you short paragraphs and maybe one question assigned to it. I'm sorry, maybe a short paragraph or two paragraphs with one question assigned to it. The charts and graph questions, I'm not a big fan of, but if you know how to deal with them, then you can, I don't know, swallow the bitter pill and deal with the stupid science related charts and graphs for the SAT reading. Now, the ACT, do they have science related passages? Yes. The passages that are given to you in the ACT, they're long passages. They're 2 columns of text, and you have a series of 9 questions. But again, we're going to go back to what I started talking about, the actual number of passages that you'll be scored when you take the test that you'll have scored. Let's see. All right, here we are. ACT English. Let's talk about the English section first. In the English section, you have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 passages. But in this test, one of the passages is not going to be scored. In this case, the last passage here, this passage number 6, is not scored. I don't think that's fair. They should allow you to have every passage or every question scored when you're taking a test. I mean, for goodness sakes, you are taking a 50-question exam and they only give you 35 minutes. So timing is tight. Will you know which passage is the unscored passage? No, you won't. You'll find out after the fact when you get your score report and you see that your performance on that particular passage doesn't even show up. Now, let's take a look at the math section of the ACT. In the ACT, you have 4 unscored questions. So you are tested on 45 questions of math, but they will subtract 4 of those questions. So if you answered those 4 unscored questions correctly, you don't get extra credit. But at the same time, you're not penalized if you answer them incorrectly. But you still don't lose any of the 50 minutes that are given to you. Now, in the math section, we don't have a complete area that's going to be taken away. It's just 4 unscored questions. And typically, it's going to be 1 in the easy section, maybe 1 or 2 in the medium level section, and 1 in the hard section of the exam. Now you're probably wondering, what is an easy section of the test? Really, the easy section of the ACT math section is going to be the first 15 questions, in which you should be able to eliminate those questions about 8 to 10 minutes. I tell my students 20 to 30 seconds per question for easy questions, and 20 to 30 seconds per question for the medium level questions. So you should really focus your energy and attention on the first 30 questions out of the 45 that are given to you. Now, within those first 30 questions, 3 will not be scored. We can't predict which ones are not going to be scored. It would be impossible to do. I'd say just treat every question as if you had to defuse a live bomb, and save yourself the trouble and the stress of trying to figure that stuff out, of detecting hard questions. I'm sorry, unscored questions. Now, the last set of questions are the hard questions. Those are the last 15 questions. So you'll have a strategy on how to manipulate those last 15 questions. But in order to really own those 15 questions, the toughest ones, the last 15, you're going to have some extra time, which is why we spend 20 to 30 seconds on easy questions, 20 to 30 seconds on medium level questions. Because if you do that, then you're going to have about 30 to 34 minutes of time for the last 15 questions. So you're almost building about 2 minutes per questions to deal with the hard questions. Now, let's go over to the reading. The reading section of the exam, I hate that they're going to eliminate an entire passage. In fact, when I worked on this practice test, my favorite passage was the first passage, and it happened to be the one that's going to be unscored. There were 9 questions and 10 minutes per passage. But again, we don't know which passage is not going to be scored. So we have to treat every passage as if they're actually count towards our final score for the ACT. So there are different types of passages. The first passage is typically going to be prose fiction or literary narrative. The second passage usually is humanities, but it could also be sociology or natural science. There's one type of passage that I don't like because I believe it steals a lot of time from students and makes them get a little too confused, and that's going to be the dual passage. That's where they give you, oh, a passage A was written by this author and a passage B was written by another author. Then you have to compare and contrast their positions on any given topic. That tends to stress students out. So I typically will take that passage and dummy my answer straight down. So you're going to hear me talk about dummy answers. A dummy answer is going to be an answer that you provide when you run into a question that you're not too certain on how to handle. So it may be a very tough math question. You're like, forget that noise. I'm just going to go with D all day long. Answer choice D with any questions that give me trouble. When typically students, when they're working on a question, they're not too certain on which answer to go with because they're completely lost. Then they start thinking about, well, how many times did I answer A? How many times did I answer B in the previous questions? No. First thing in the morning, you're going to decide which answer you're going to select as soon as you get jammed. In the first 5 seconds, you feel uncomfortable with the question, dummy answer straight up. And that's pretty much it for the format of the test. Now, I didn't mention the science section. The science section, you have the option to take the ACT with science or without science. Take it without the science. Most colleges in the country don't care about the science score. However, if you're going to apply to, let's say, MIT, or let's Georgia Tech, any of the techie schools that are science-based, more than likely they're going to ask for a science ACT score. So depending on the school that you're applying to, look up the school and find out if they require you taking the ACT with science. If they do so, then there's going to be a strategy for that also. I'll cover that in another video. For the most part, most of you students are looking at the English, the math, and the reading section of the exam. Oh, one more thing before I go. What about the scoring? How many questions do you need to answer to get decent scores? Well, in the state of Florida, we have what's called Bright Future Scholarship. To qualify for 100% Bright Future Scholarship, you need to get a score of a 29. In this particular test for the English section, that means you'd have to answer 35 questions out of the 50 questions correctly to get that 29. That's like scoring a solid B in the ACT. To get 75% Bright Futures, That's a score of a 25. That means you'd have to answer 31 questions out of the 50 of the English section. And then in the state of Florida, I have students who are trying to meet graduation requirements. They'd have to score an 18. That's 22 questions out of 50 questions, well below the 50th percentile to get their graduation requirements for the reading English score. Now, for grad requirements, before I move on to the math, for grad requirements, you have to average an 18 between the English and the reading sections of the exam. But in the reading section, all you need to do is answer 14 questions correctly in order to get an 18. Now, if you were to add 18 plus 18, divide that by 2, then you have an average English reading score of 18, and therefore you would meet your graduation requirements for the reading section of the exam. Now, in the ACT math section, to qualify for 100% Bright Futures, you need to score again a 29, and that's answering 32 of the 45 questions correctly. To qualify for 75%, you have to score a 25. That's answering 26 out of the 45 questions correctly. And for grad requirements, you need to answer 16 questions in order to get a score of a 16 to meet your graduation requirements for math. All right, that sets you up for the rest of the story, and that's breaking down your cheat sheet. Your cheat sheet for breaking down the ACT English section, math section, reading section, and the science sections are right here. So if you wanted to pause your video or do a screenshot, you can go ahead and be my guest. Dummy answering, again, is the answer that you will always use for questions that give you trouble. You don't want to think about which answer you want to select. Just go with your first instinct in the morning. The last SAT test that I took, I chose answer choice B. The last ACT test that I took, I chose answer choice C anytime I got stuck. But I'd always know where to find them because I can always go back and find those questions that I answered were either my dummy answer B or C. Do I ever choose A as a dummy answer? No, I just don't choose A because I don't believe the test makers really use the first answer choice as often as you wish they would to be correct. All right, your English section. You have 6 passages. Remember, one of the passages is not going to be scored. So that means 10 questions will not be scored. You'll be scored out of 40 questions, but you still have 35 minutes. You don't lose time. That means you have more than a minute per question. But your first step within the first 60 seconds, every first 60 seconds of any part of the exam is very important. You need to label and dummy answer and flag every later question. Now, a later question in the English section of the exam is going to be a question that forces you to slow down and think about which answers to pick. You'll be able to identify them because they're long-winded questions and typically with long answers. Now, step 2, after you've dummied answered all those questions, which we'll do in a different video, you see how easy it is, but you have to practice. When you see the steps of attacking the English section, it seems so easy, but if you don't actually do it with a digital practice test or a paper-based test, it's going to be a little confusing doing it on test day. So just take about 20 minutes and click on the link and practice doing these steps for the English section. Now, when you finish dummy answering all the later questions, then you go back and attack, not just review, no, attack the remaining friendly questions. Now, the friendlier questions is going to be lists of question types that you need to be familiar with so you know that they're friendly for you to handle and answer correctly. Now, you'd work on from the beginning to the end on the rest of the English questions. Just to give you an idea what friendly questions look like, I'll go to the next page. These are your friendly questions. Which choice makes the sentence most grammatically acceptable? Basically, it's just pick the answer that's grammatically correct. The second question, which choice most effectively maintains the essay's tone? Basically, it's all about tone. You're looking for, what is that word? A professional tone whenever you're reading any of the passages. If it sounds really cool or laid back, forget it. It's going to be wrong. Just follow the actual tone that's being used in the first paragraph, and it should be the same tone going all the way through. The other type of question, which choice is least redundant? Redundancy was never indicated as a question during the old ACT. With this new digital test, they're actually telling you there's going to be redundancy involved or possibly not involved within that question. So that's a big help for us. That makes the test easier. Next question, which choice is clearest and most precise in context? Typically, that's going to be either just like the next question, which transition word or phrase is most logical in context? You deal with vocabulary or transition words. Whenever you deal with a transition word, you're checking out what happened in the previous sentence, read the next sentence, and then decide what was the big transition between the two sentences. Or if you're choosing to declare the most precise choice in context, basically they're just asking for the best vocab that fits within the sentence. Last type of friendly question is which choice best maintains the stylistic pattern of descriptions? All right, stylistic pattern, that just means parallelism. So they're looking, if they're giving you, let's say, like three adjectives, they should be parallel to one another. If they're giving you three verbs, they should be parallel to one another. And that's really it. So notice that these are friendly questions, but they're worded in a way that could be a little confusing. But if you review these again in the next video, you'd realize they're not that hard. They're just made to sound a little hard. Now, the unfriendly questions, these are the unfriendly questions. The writer wants to emphasize blah, 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 blah. Usually it's like 3 lines of text that slow you down. Remember, these are long-winded. They make you think a lot and waste time. They spread them out throughout the test. If you can detect them, you're going to dummy answer. Pick your letter of the day, dummy that answer, and then get them all done in the first 60 seconds. Then you can back up and do all the friendly questions. The friendly questions, they're like 20 to 30 seconds each. When you get through all the friendly questions, when they're all done, which the majority of the questions will be friendly questions, then you're going to have all this extra time left over. It might be about a minute and a half per question so that you can sit down and own these unfriendly questions. Here's another type. Given that all the choices are accurate or given that all the choices are true. Students get confused with that. They're telling you really that all the answers could be correct, but only one, and they'll tell you what the recipe is for that one. The next type, which choice best helps indicate if the writer were to delete the underlined portion of phrase, what would happen to it? Is another one. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following, whatever it is, designed to waste time. The writer wants to add the following sentence to essay. Where would be the best placement for this? So the rest of these I'm not going to read through because when we go through the next video on the English section, then you'll know exactly how to dummy answer and back that bus up and take care of the friendly questions. Once you attack the friendly questions, you're going to realize, whoo-wee, I think I got skills to pay the bills to own my score. By the way, there was a practice test one for the English section. I'll mention this now. I was going to hold off in the next video. Practice test one for the English section. If you were to focus on only the friendly questions, you ignored the unfriendly questions, that would be a total of 28 questions out of 40 questions. Remember, yes, there are 50 English questions and 10 of which are not being, I'm sorry, 9 of which are not being scored. So you have 28 of 40 questions. Now, what kind of a score would you receive if you only focus on the friendly questions? Remember, 28, you'd get a score of a 22. Now, a lot of you guys wouldn't be happy with it, right? A 22, maybe you would. If you were a student at risk of not graduating, a 22 would serve you handsomely. Now, some colleges, they'd be happy with the 22. But for the more competitive schools, you want to get a higher score. Now, remember I said that these were the friendly questions. Well, what about the unfriendly questions? If you were to select your answers for the unfriendly questions, of which there'll be 12 out of 40 of these guys, but we know we're not going to answer them all correctly because some of them are a bit difficult. If you dummy answering, you could have answered an additional 3 questions. So with the additional 3 questions, that would give you a score of a 25. Now, again, in the state of Florida, that qualified for 75% bright futures. Well, what would I need to get a 29? That would be answering out of the 12 an additional 7 questions, just 7 out of that 12. That would give you a 29, which would qualify for 100% bright futures. So there's the strategy. You want to spend most of your time working on your friendly questions and then the remaining time working on your unfriendly questions. But you've already met a big part of your requirement by attacking the easier questions, which are the friendlier ones, so that you gain more time to sit down on the remaining 12 of the 40 questions. When you take it as a digital test or a paper-based test, it really makes life a lot easier. The average students, you're going to work on questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then running into speed bumps, which are the unfriendly questions, and blowing their time. And that's why students run out of time in the English section, in the reading and the math sections. They don't follow a strategy. So that's the big picture so far with the English. I'm going to take a look at the math section. Students ask me, well, what can I do with the math section? Well, remember the math section of the exam, what's really involved is going to be Algebra 1 and Geometry 1. That's it. That's the bottom line with the math section of the SAT and ACTs. Just really involves Algebra 1 and Geometry 1. Now, the tougher Algebra 1 questions, yes, they're a bit tougher, but we know where to find them. They'll be the last third of the test, which would be questions 31 through 45. Now, we're given 45 questions. Remember that 4 of these questions are not being scored. So we're only graded on 41 of the 45 questions, but we still have 50 minutes. So we have more than a minute per question. Well, your business, step 1, within the first 60 seconds, you're going to go to the last questions 31 through 45 within the first 60 seconds. And you're going to dummy answer those last 15 questions. Get them out of the way, have them each tagged with an answer. Then you're going to back up and start working on question number 1. Then work on question number 2 and so on. Get all of the first 30 questions worked on. And it should take you about 20 to 30 seconds per question, but maybe a couple of questions might take you a minute, but no more than a minute per question. If you lock up on a question within the first 5 seconds, you'll realize that you're stuck on a question. All you have to do is circle or flag. You circle it if you take it as a paper-based test, or you flag it if you take it as a digital test. Circle or flag the question and then dummy answer, because you can always come back to that question later. Never ever hug questions during an exam. You can try to eliminate obviously wrong answers, but certainly dummy answer if you can't do so. Now, the last step to the math section is to, when you finish working on questions 1 through 30, then try out questions 31 through 45, the ones that have already been dummy answered. Perhaps some of those, maybe 3, 4 of those, you can change the answer because you're familiar with that type of question. Once you've reached question number 45, go back to any of the circle of flag questions in questions number 1 through 30. And that's your business with the math section. Now, the best advice I can give you to prepare for the math section is to practice. And what are you practicing? Basic fundamentals of algebra, basic fundamentals of geometry. The tougher, harder questions, with a little more time, you'll learn how to own those questions as well. All right, the reading section of the exam. There are certain steps. Now, for those students who have trouble with the reading section of the exam, maybe you're an English second language student, you better follow this process. For those of you who love to read, this process certainly helps you as well. Remember, the test makers like to take advantage of high GPA students because they really believe in their abilities, and that's completely cool. But they're also set up for traps and speed bumps that they won't realize if they don't prepare properly. Now, the reading section, you do have 4 passages. And of the 4 passages, well, the 4 passages contain 36 questions, but there's certainly 9 questions that will not be scored. That means an entire passage. So instead of 4 passages, we're really being tested on 3 passages. Can we predict which passage is not going to be scored? Nope. But we do not lose time. We will have 40 minutes for 3 passages, which does give us an advantage. Now, what I'm going to explain to you, you should practice. If you like this style, then you can adjust your style just like anybody would. As soon as they start learning how to drive, they get their license. Give that person a year or 2, and they're going to have their own style of driving compared to when they first started. It's going to be radically different. Safe, but a little different. Maybe they lean the seat back a bit more, or maybe like to have the seat pushed up a bit more than others. But you will certainly have your own style. So the reading section, step 1. Within the first 60 seconds, here we go again. First 60 seconds, look for the dual passage. The passage that say passage that reads passage A and passage B. Those passages are certainly designed to slow you down, dummy answer, and flag its questions. So if it's a paper-based test, just provide the dummy answer on your bubble sheet. If it's a digital test, you're going to flag those questions, but also provide your dummy answer. Step 2. You're going to pick the first passage that you'd want to work on. Just read the blurb, the introduction to the story, see if it catches your attention. If it does, then go with it. The next thing you're going to do is follow the 4-step reading cheat method. That's located on the next page that I provided for you. And here it is. Your 4-step reading method when you're working on a passage, you're going to read the blurb to frame your mind as to what's going on. Step 2, you're going to attack the questions. This should take you about 60 seconds to do. When you're attacking the questions, like seeing a preview of a movie, You go through those questions, you label your later questions, but you're going to leave a trail for any questions that are early. Now, those early or friendly questions are going to be line and paragraph reference questions. You know, the type of questions that say in lines 12 through 15, the author wants to, whatever it is. Those are early questions. But if you see a question that doesn't tell you where to go look in a passage, those are later questions. Now, when you're reading the questions, follow the flow of the questions, understand what's being asked because they're basically giving you the story within the questions. Every question is going to set you up, if you put it all together, to give you the main idea of the big picture of that story. So that when you do go back into the passage to do what? Step three, you're going to skim and take quick notes. If you're taking the paper-based test, you can take quick notes. If you're taking the digital test, it wouldn't be a good idea. You can highlight using the tools that are given to you during the reading section. Highlighting would be pretty good, but you don't want to highlight everything. You just want to highlight the words or the sentence that gives you the main idea of that particular paragraph. If you're going to write down quick notes, just 2 or 3 keywords of what's going on in that paragraph is good enough. You recall when you go back to the paragraph that you'd read maybe 2 minutes before, you read the key words about that paragraph, the whole idea, the main idea will come right back to you. Now, I don't advise underlining everything because it doesn't help. Writing or quick noting, 2 to 3 words for the main idea goes a long way. So much better than just underlining. Break up a long paragraph into smaller parts if necessary. So I like to break it up every, I don't know, 7 to 10 lines. I'll write a quick note as to what I had read. The next 7 to 10 lines, I'll write another word or two as to what I had read, just to keep a stream of thought. It's almost like outlining. The last step is going to be attacking your answers. Always, always attack your answers from the bottom up. Why from the bottom up? Because test makers like to give you baited answers for you to get caught on a hook if you read the answers from the top down. Well, let's go back to the early questions. Any of the early questions, just completely skim the paragraph, then attack your answers from the bottom up. Cross out any answers that are definitely wrong. Now, I know in the ACT digital test, you can highlight answers that are wrong or gray them out. I think it's a waste of time, but if you feel comfortable doing that, make sure you practice it so you don't waste time doing it or getting confused. If you're stuck between two answers, always go back to the passage and see if you can shake out the best answer. But don't blow your timing. If you're stuck between two answers, guess, get out. You can always go back later. And that's pretty much it. Down here, you have some homework passage drills. If you want to practice what we had just covered, there you go. Just click on or print a reading passage and try the drill out. It'll make you much sharper during the reading section of the exam because remember, that timer is against you throughout the entire test, any section of the exam. Now, the science section. You can screenshot this and review it. It's very self-explanatory, but it'll be better if I leave this for a separate video dealing with the science section. If you are taking the science section tomorrow, but you haven't done much to prepare for it, if I were you, I just leave it blank. Don't let it drag you down. Or you can go through the science section and get familiar with it. But the next time you take the test, you'll be better prepared. And the next time you'd follow these steps that are listed in front of you. Let's see. Oh, another thing to know. When you sign up for the ACT, they will ask you if you want to include the writing section, which is the essay. It's a 40-minute essay. Colleges do not care about that ACT essay. Out of the entire country, I think there are only 6, maybe 7 colleges that require ACT essay. In the state of Florida, not one college requires the ACT essay, but there are 2 or 3 that recommend it if your scores are, let's say, mediocre compared to the scores that they actually had their last year's incoming freshmen have. So if you didn't do too well in the SATs and you're running out of time, you're like, well, maybe this essay will help me push, my application over the top. Really, even then, I think it's a waste of time. The most important essay that you'll write to get into a college is going to be your college application essay, where they give you an essay prompt and you have all the world of time to write an awesome essay. If you write your essay in the ACT and you haven't practiced, you're not good at writing essays longhand or typing it out, 40 minutes, you're really writing the best rough draft that you can come up with. 40 minutes is too tight of time to be judged on for college admissions. And that is it for your cheat sheet. So if you want this doc, all you have to do is just contact me, 786-877-7231. I'll make sure to forward it to you. I don't mind. There's no charge for this. ACT English friendly questions. Please, please get familiar with these guys so that you can own it. The other recommendation I give you are getting familiar with your comma rules. Your comma rules, if you've forgotten the basics of comma rules, they're right here. You have lists, introductory clauses, the separation of two complete sentences, or fanboys, and you have unnecessary information that's being used at the end of the sentence and in the middle of a sentence. Now, for these four rules, very easy stuff. I have a separate video. I think it's about 8 minutes. You can, the same document will be used in that video, and then I'll explain everything you need to know about commas, which will include rules on semicolons, rules on hyphens and colons, rules on prepositional phrases, and let's see. Oh, little triggers like this. You see the word that? Remember that that never ever has a comma before it. It's always without a comma. But if you notice the word which, there's always a comma that comes before the word which. It's just a basic rule. So the test makers, they'll give you a sentence. Here, I'll read this sentence, for example. I ate fries that were bought yesterday. The next sentence, I ate fries which were bought yesterday. They're both saying the same thing. You can use the word that, but you have to use the word that without a comma, or you can use the word which, but it has to be the word which with a comma. If you ever see the word which without a comma, you got to get rid of that answer choice. Or if you ever see the word that with a comma, you got to get rid of that answer choice. So that's another helpful tip because I'm certain that you will see that during the exam. And by the way, lastly, about comma rules. If you ever see a comma before the word which, like you see here in this sentence, right, with the word which, but later on you do see another comma, that means which were bought yesterday is unnecessary information that you can take out. You can take the comma to comma, take it completely out, and check to see if it makes sense with the other words that are left over. I ate fries in my car. Completely makes sense. Now, if I were to include which were bought yesterday, would it make sense? I ate fries, comma, which were bought yesterday in my car. So what's the deal with which? What is it representing? It represents the word fries. So it's a pronoun taking the place of the word fries. Or I could separate it into two complete sentences. I ate fries in my car. The fries were bought yesterday. But rather than use two sentences, you can squeeze it all into one sentence. Now notice, comma to comma can also be used by using what? Replacing the commas with hyphen to hyphen, or you can use parenthesis to parenthesis all day long. So that's a quick explanation there. The rest of it will be in your comma rules video. If you have any requests for any of the other points of punctuation, like apostrophes, I'll provide that video as well. Apostrophes, colons, hyphens, commas, and I think that's good enough. If you understand that stuff, if you go through the videos, then you would have an easier time taking the ACT English section. Math, you have your formula guide. Now, these formulas are not provided before the math section of the exam. They're not given to you, so it makes good sense to review these. If you're taking the test within 24 hours, again, don't sweat the small stuff. Just go with what you can recall. All the stuff you guys already know. It's just gotten rusty and dusty in your minds. The other items that you should be familiar with are going to be your exponent rules. Oh, big time question. Is Desmos given to you in the ACT as it's given to you in the SAT? Yes, Desmos is provided. In fact, I believe that Desmos will also have, because the ACTs, they love using matrix questions. You can have Desmos with matrix that will be given to you. I'm sure some of you guys will let me know if it didn't have the matrix button provided. But yes, you can use Desmos. Is it as capable as the SAT's Desmos functions? I've heard so far that it is when I've taken it. I hardly use Desmos, so I'm not a Desmos user. I just use my $1.78 calculator from Walmart because the tests have been designed so you don't need to use a calculator. So once you understand the basic concepts of what's going on in math, really you don't need the calculator. But if you want to use Desmos to make sure to make certain that you provided the right answer, yeah, then Desmos helps you a great deal. I have one student in my class. in my small group classes. Her name is Gabby, and she loves using Desmos. She calls herself the Desmos Wizard. She's great at using it, but sometimes she gets caught because the test makers know that you're going to use Desmos for most of your questions. Therefore, they will give you tricky questions to stump you when you use Desmos. So be very careful when using Desmos. Certainly practice. Do you really need to know how to use Desmos? Oh my goshness, I'm taking a test tomorrow. No, just use your basic calculator. You're good to go. By the way, you can bring up to 2 calculators to the test, but you can only use one during the test, but you can have up to 2. Why 2, but you can only use one? Because let's say your calculator dies or something like that, then you have your backup calculator. Don't rely on the facility to provide calculators for you. So make sure you've got your calculator for both the SAT and ACT, and that is your big overview for the ACT. Hopefully you'll take a look at the other videos, which will break down the English, the math, and the reading, and the science section of the test. Take care, you guys. Any questions, again, you know where to find me. Mr. Alberto, 786-877-7231. Peace out.